Good morning. I'm Senior Meteorologist Andrew Pritchard with your Ag Weather Update. Today's Friday, January 17th, 2025. A lot to talk about today. We've got a rainy, snowy weekend across the south and the east, and that kind of leads us into a big cold snap next week, looking at some record-breaking cold reaching all the way down to the Gulf Coast. That then leads us into a southern U.S. winter storm. I think we may be looking at a winter weather disaster across parts of the south next week. When it comes to that combination of bitterly cold temperatures and some wintry precipitation that's really going to push infrastructure to its limits across this region early next week. That will then take us into talking about the fire risk potentially returning across parts of California, another dry week in the west, and then we'll look at the February and spring outlook just issued by NOAA and the Climate Prediction Center. But this week, we're talking about or at least ending the week with split flow across the Pacific, across the western U.S. So the jet stream comes screaming in from the Pacific, runs into this Rex block across the west, and then splits. We got this northern branch and then a southern branch. And it's this southern branch we've really kind of lacked for much of the winter that's going to help kind of kick off some precipitation, a couple waves of precip across the eastern U.S. as we go through the weekend. We'll look at the infrared satellite picture here getting started Friday morning again. Here's the big cold snap looming off to our north in an area of low pressure kind of traveling along the U.S.-Canada border. Is going to bring some snow to parts of Canada and the Great Lakes as we go through the weekend. But here's that flow across the south. That southern branch of the jet stream that's making its way in here is going to kick off a couple of areas of low pressure that'll lift from the southern U.S. up through the east, bringing some wintry precipitation to the north and some rain and thunderstorms across parts of the southeast. So here's the jet stream from the European model. We'll kind of track this through the next 4 days or so. Looking at the wide picture across all of North America, just to kind of pick out some of our features. Again, here's that split flow, the northern branch, the southern branch. It's this disturbance right here that's going to kick off the first wave of precipitation as it makes its way east over the next 24 to 48 hours. Let's time this out for you. We'll bring it back. Here's Friday. This takes us into Saturday. This is now getting into Sunday. You're seeing the phasing of these two waves here leading to this big area of low pressure, this big trough that's going to bring in all the cold air to areas east of the Rockies as we head through the early part of next week. But it's this fast flow, just kind of a broad area, fast flow across the eastern half of the U.S. that's going to kick off a couple rounds of precipitation through the weekend. So the response here, again, we're bringing in some jet stream flow across the region. This is the moisture. We're looking at precipitable water, so the moisture content within the profile of the atmosphere, dry across the region right now. Excuse me. But as we bring in this flow across the southern U.S., you're going to see it tug that moisture northward. We'll see, again, a couple of cyclones develop. Here's the first one that brings some rain and snow to the region, maybe some snow to the parts of the Great Lakes as we go through the overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. Rain and thunderstorms across the south where we have the deeper moisture. That front kind of makes its way through, stalls across the region Saturday night. You see the first tug of moisture, cold dry air coming in here, and that kicks off another little area of low pressure here on Sunday that could bring some precipitation to the region as well. So we'll look at this actually in a way that makes some sense to you, the context here, the precipitation type forecast through the weekend. So we're pretty quiet, some flurries coming off the lakes here across the Great Lakes, parts of the Northeast to get the day started on Friday. It'll be a quiet Friday night for most of us across the East. You start to see that rain lifting in across the lower and the mid-Mississippi valleys tonight, spreading into the Ohio Valley, parts of the Southeast as we get into Saturday morning. So this will be about midnight Friday night. Here's sunrise on Saturday, some wintry mix across parts of the Eastern Corn Belt into the Mid-Atlantic with rain and thunder across Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Here's your midday Saturday, your Saturday afternoon, your Saturday evening. This would be now Saturday overnight, getting into a pretty quiet Sunday morning. Some snow, wintry mix in the higher elevations here across the Appalachians, parts of the Mid-Atlantic, and then you get this next low that kind of develops off the coast of the Atlantic here, maybe bringing some snow to parts of the Northeast, part of the metro. Here as we get into Sunday evening, this is about 7 p.m. On Sunday evening, getting into the overnight. This would be about Monday morning now as the sun comes up. We're down to lake effect snow coming off the lakes as we got this big shot of cold air now overspreading the region. So total precipitation through the weekend across the region. You're seeing a lot of totals here, a few tenths up to a half an inch, anywhere from parts of southern Illinois down to the southeastern U.S. That heavier precipitation where the front kind of stalls there, we get more in the way of rounds of showers and thunderstorms here. We could get into that 1 to 2 inch range across parts of southern Georgia, into the northern half of Florida. How much snow? You see that over on the right. Again, enhancement from the lakes when you're in the kind of lake effect snow zone, especially as we get into Sunday and Monday. But we're talking about, anywhere from a trace to a couple of inches across parts of the Northeast as we head through the next 48 to 72 hours. So not the most disruptive event here, but it's just going to be kind of active across the area over the next 3 days. Again, it's all of that kind of leads us into this big cold snap next week. We're going to be talking about a big area of low pressure developing right here in the center part of the country. Couple of waves here that may be reinforcing that colder air at times as we head through the last week or so of January. We'll look at this big push, though. This is the big one we've been talking about the last several days, almost the last week or so. Overspreading areas east of the Rockies, just kind of spilling in here. This is Sunday into Monday, and then we'll take this on into Monday and Tuesday. We start to see those temperatures moderate just a bit late week, but here's what I'm talking about. Here's another reinforcing shot toward the end of the week that really especially hits areas across the south and the southeastern U.S., kind of delaying that warm up, delaying the moderation of temperatures until potentially the last week of January. So we can kind of time this out with the European AI forecast system. I'll show you the coldest overnight lows here in a moment, but just kind of timing the cold front starts to push into the Corn Belt on Saturday, or Friday night really, into Saturday. Parts of the central and eastern Corn Belt, where I live here in Champaign, where our local office is, excuse me, we'll see those temperatures falling through the day on Saturday, and it'll be Sunday will be the first really cold day across the region. But at any rate, let's just kind of walk through this. This is your Saturday. This is Saturday night. This is Sunday. This is now Monday. You're seeing the cold air, settling across the region. This is now Monday night. Getting into Tuesday, and then as we get into Wednesday, potentially later into the week, we could start to see those temperatures starting to moderate, at least in some areas here. We'll look at the overnight lows, though. This is as you wake up Monday morning, those overnight lows well below zero across the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Overnight lows around minus 20 to minus 25 Fahrenheit across the Dakotas, northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin. Will be sub-zero, where you see that transition there from Nebraska into parts of northeastern Kansas, northern Missouri, central and northern Illinois, central and northern Indiana, over into Ohio. Those temperatures below zero, and then single digits, getting down into parts of the mid-south. And then look at that, sub-freezing all the way down to the Gulf Coast. So we're going to be talking about overnight lows in the middle 20s, all the way down to, coastal areas of the deep, deep south. This is your Tuesday morning, still looking at temperatures in the 20s across the south. This is when we'll start to bring in some wintry precipitation, which we'll talk about in a moment. Wednesday morning, you're starting to see the coldest air pulling off to the north into the east across the Great Lakes Sea in the northeast, but it is still going to be quite cold through the end of the week across areas east of the Rockies. This is your Wednesday morning temperatures in the teens, all the way down to parts of coastal areas of Texas and Louisiana, Mississippi, Biloxi. They're talking about wintry precipitation, maybe some snow on the ground, potentially dragging those temperatures down even a bit more on Wednesday morning. So bitterly cold Tuesday and Wednesday across the region. We'll shift off to the east. This is your Wednesday morning, again, as the coldest air starts to lift into the Great Lakes in the northeast with those temperatures. Again, minus 5 to minus 15 across the region with teens and 20s, below freezing all the way into North Florida. So this is going to be an extremely disruptive cold snap, one that's really going to push the infrastructure across the region. And then as the cold air makes its way south, we get an area of low pressure that kind of runs along that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, bringing a corridor of wintry precipitation to the deep, deep south. So we'll look at this. The loop starts off with the weekend precipitation generally impacting, the southeast and the eastern U.S. The cold snap comes in over the weekend, and this takes us into, this is Sunday night, Monday morning, getting into midday Monday, and now Monday night. You're starting to see it come together here across parts of Texas. We'll get some flow that kind of races in right along that frontal boundary and brings some Gulf moisture north up and over the top of that boundary. And of course, it's sub-freezing north of that boundary, so precipitation will freeze. We may have a corridor of freezing rain, ice accumulations in coastal areas with snow to the north of that. So this is Tuesday morning, midday Tuesday, Tuesday evening. This is now Tuesday night, and this would be Wednesday morning. I'm seeing two areas here that really have the potential for some ice accumulation. We'll compare these side by side. The European and the GFS, there's still time for some fluctuations here, but at this point, universally across the board with our models, we have agreement in some form of wintry precipitation here. There's just some subtle changes, subtle differences in the exact timing and amounts here. But side by side, this is 6 p.m. Central on Tuesday evening, January 21st, European on the left, GFS on the right, both of which have a widespread area of snow across the south with freezing rain and ice along coastal areas with rain as you get down over toward the Gulf of Mexico. How much snow? We'll sort that out in coming days. The European ensemble probabilities here, probability of 1 inch or more on the left, probability of 3 inches or more on the right. And it's possible that, we'll see these these values ebbing and flowing, increasing in some areas, decreasing in others as we start to get higher confidence here. But you see that area from East Texas across Louisiana into southern portions of Mississippi really highlighted there with the potential for accumulating snow. Same as we get into parts of Georgia and the Carolinas. And then the potential for some freezing rain. Again, a snapshot here on the left. This is Tuesday morning, and then on the right, it's about midnight Tuesday. And I wanted to show just, a couple areas where the models are suggesting a wider geographic area with the potential for some significant ice accumulations. And that's across portions of South and East Texas, the Houston area, over towards southern Louisiana on Tuesday morning. And then as we get into the overnight Tuesday, parts of southern Georgia into the Florida Panhandle, parts of northern Florida, and then eventually into coastal portions of the Carolinas. Really concerned about ice accumulations there and the potential for significant accumulations that could potentially lead to tree damage, power outages, and of course dangerous road conditions. And that's going to be true with that snow potential as well. There's just, I hate to use the word disaster to try and amp it up, but not knowing what exactly this is going to look like, but we know that these areas are not well versed in wintry weather, and these are going to be some extreme, potentially record-breaking temperatures with significant winter precipitation potentially coming on the backside. So both of these elements have the potential to push infrastructure to its limits across these regions. Again, I'm talking about southeastern Texas, the Houston area over to New Orleans, southern Louisiana, parts of southern Mississippi, Alabama, southern Georgia, and North Florida. Heads up, early next week, we may be looking at a winter weather disaster, to use it, the term not lightly. We'll shift off to the west, talk briefly about the fire weather risk here. I do it briefly because we're talking about kind of late next week is when this kind of returns, but it's going to be another dry week across the region. The CPC, NOAA is already highlighting this in their day 6 to 10 outlook, chance for below normal precipitation. We're looking at those winds potentially reaching high levels again, January 24th and 25th, maybe the days surrounding that as well. Here's the setup, again, dry on the left, and then we'll animate the upper level winds, and I'll show you what it is that they're watching here. And it's as we get into, again, that 24th and 25th time frame, you see that area of low pressure kind of diving down here, again, kind of reinforcing the cold air across the eastern, central, and southern U.S. This kicker also kind of instigates some of the snow across the south as well. But we get kind of one event here as we get into the early part of next week. But what the CPC is really kind of keeping an eye on is later on in the week, that 24th and 25th time frame, as this next little area of low pressure, this trough, it's not really little, it's a kind of a big disturbance kind of diving south, getting tripped over just semantics at this point. But the gist of it is dry conditions continue. We've got several disturbances that drop into the region next week that could kick those winds back up to high levels with offshore flow, with low relative humidity. So something we may be talking about. We'll get into specifics if specific events really warrant that next week. But I want to let you know this potential continues. But as I look deeper into the forecast here, as we look for a potential pattern change late month into February, not looking at any sort of immediate return of deep moisture, but what I see here is a couple of disturbances that may finally bring some onshore flow with some Pacific moisture to bring some precipitation to parts of Southern California. Right now, the European AI forecast system has that happening. The first one here, maybe around January 27th and 28th. But the better chance here for some precipitation kind of running down the west coast is early in the week after next week. So we're way out there. We're like 10, 12 days out into the future, talking about January 27, 28, 29. But that would be great news. We can finally kind of just get some moisture returned back to the region. Not only that, but kind of get away from this pattern that continually is bringing these offshore Santa Ana winds. We'll finish up talking about the February and seasonal outlooks from NOAA here. We got the latest update, temperatures on the left, precipitation on the right. They're really, following the model trends here, which continue to suggest maybe we move the western U.S. ridge west, and then we take that trough that's continued to reinforce across, the Great Lakes in the North Atlantic, bring that back to the west as well, kind of open up the Gulf of Mexico and maybe get this active storm track running across the Ohio Valley, and then potentially bringing some precipitation back to the Pacific Northwest as well. So this would be kind of hinting at a jet stream trajectory like we talked about in one of the videos that I shared earlier in the week. I kind of showed some of the seasonal updates that were hinting at exactly this. Precipitation maybe returning to the Pacific Northwest, but then more confidently that active storm track across the Ohio Valley, bringing potentially, more active conditions here. What does that mean? Are we talking about winter storms? Do we have an early run of severe weather or heavy rain events across parts of the Ohio Valley as we head into February? We'll have to just kind of address each storm system as it comes. You see the warmer, drier conditions forecast across the southwest parts of the southern plains, which is, of course, why we've got some concern about that expanding across the growing season as we, talk about areas in the central, northern, and eastern United States as well. So the forecast here for February, the forecast for February, March, and April don't differ much, both of which kind of going after a pretty classic La Nina look. Colder and more active across the Pacific Northwest, an active storm track running through the Ohio Valley with potentially above average storms, or above average precipitation across that region, and then that temperature divide, this colder air to the northwest, warmer air to the south and to the east. Right between that is when we would expect to have an active jet stream with storm systems running across there. So we'll see how this evolves, but this is a forecast that continues to gain some confidence as we head ever closer to the end of winter and the beginning of spring. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'll talk to you all again next Monday morning.